projects planned to the County Commission. The county did not approve the funding or indicated at that meeting they would not look favorably on the funding for the new high school as it was planned. Some of that was based on some spaces, existing schools. Most of it was based on the fact that the county has a significant debt and not wanting to go deeper into debt during the economic situation as it is. I heard a couple of statements during the open mic that I'd like to speak to specifically, and one is that there is no possibility, it does not exist, to have clean feeder patterns in Williamson County, because we have middle schools with a capacity of 900 or above feeding high schools with capacities of 1,800 or less. So if you just look at that phenomena, you have a middle school with 3 grades with 900 students, which is 300 students per grade. If you feed one middle school to a high school, then you have a high school with 1,200 students. If you feed 2 middle schools, you have a high school of 2,400 students. Currently, we don't even have the ability to add to the existing high schools, many of them, to create that. If the board were to say tonight, we want to change that philosophy and go to a 2,400 high school so that we could have clean feeder patterns. The campuses at Brentwood, Centennial are not large enough. Independence would be very difficult to go to 2,400 on. So we don't have the ability on our campuses with land space and what's adjacent to those buildings. And I say that we probably don't want to get into and would never get approved to start buying McGavitt Farms houses in order to expand Brentwood High School, which is, as you know, it's surrounded by it. So those kinds of things exist, and they're beyond our control because for the past 15 years at least, the board has been building new high schools with a capacity of 1,800. So that becomes an impossible reality. That's not going to happen. You can set up all the task forces in the world, and you can't create a feeder pattern because you cannot get that many students into an existing high school, and the space is not there to add on to them. That being said, we currently have, as I said a moment ago, we have 775 students currently at Woodland, and we have 733 at Sunset, both of those feeding into Ravenwood, and that creates the population that exists right now, 1,900. Over the next 3 years, and probably it will go to 4 now, we would expect, because of the recession and its impact, we would expect that both Woodland and Sunset Middle would reach their capacity of 900 students or close to it, which would mean we would have approximately 2,400 students in Ravenwood. That represents 600 students over capacity, or at a ratio of 20-to-1 for a portable, and we staff our high schools at 21-to-1, about 58 portables, something like 58 portables. I don't know whether we can place 58 portables physically on that campus or not. The other recommendation to add on to a wing is not as simple, and when there's a myth about what was originally planned for Ravenwood. Yes, there were 9 more classrooms, but the capacity of the school was still originally planned for 1,800 students. What was at discussion at that time was going to a philosophical building approach where we built in a high school one classroom for one teacher. That's different than saying that is a 2,400 or a 2,200 student high school, because the internal core capacity for that school was not built for anything more than 1,800 students. So the myth, and it's not a myth in that we did talk about doing that, we have not done that because the commission at that time said we're not going to fund that philosophy, and we built since that time every high school based on that same philosophy. In fact, they were basically built on similar floor plans. So when you add on to classrooms, you're not even going to get a true capacity, and the question becomes, well, if you add on to classrooms, what would you do with those classrooms when a new high school is built? That would they sit empty? Because the reality is that when a new high school is built, you're probably going to zone 900 to 1,000 kids out of that school. So let's say that we did just following that path for a school of 2,400 with the 58 portables, and then we build the classrooms, which will take up 180 students or remove probably 9 of those portables. Then you still, and you have to build some different kinds of building. There's only one art room built in Ravenwood. It can handle the capacity fairly well for 7 periods a day. Can't handle another 600 students. So you'd have to build an art room. You'd have to build a science lab, because the science labs wouldn't handle the capacity of science. And some of those classrooms lose some of their functionality as a dual purpose. It's not, we can use a general purpose classroom 7 periods a day for art, music, and math if we have to, but it's hard to move an art class in there or have a band or a course, and vice versa to move a class into those rooms. So what happens to that space once you rezone for a new school, ostensibly taking 1,000 students out, leaving 1,600 in it, and you've got now a school that has not only the 1,800 capacity that the other high schools have, but it's also now had these general purpose and special purpose classrooms added onto it. So there are dilemmas with all of those things, and the question that is probably going to be raised at some point in time is that if you add 9 more classrooms to the building, you truly don't have a 1,800 student high school, because we have 3 other high schools with 9 less classrooms, and they have 1,800 students. So that question is probably going to be asked by a funding body at some point in time, simply because it's a reasonable question to ask. We would not have probably adequate gym space, because there's 1 general purpose gym and 1 auxiliary gym in that facility. There's 1 stage for drama. With that many students, I'm not sure if we would have, you could have a classroom with drama in a classroom, but you would not have equal access without a lot of pre-planning to the stage and planning events. We would have to add on the cafeteria, because it couldn't physically handle that many students in lunch rotation. So we look at that knowing that even if, since we don't have money to buy land, and that's probably a year down the road to buy land, and then after buying land, you have to get the school itself bonded, and then it takes 2 years to build a high school. By the time you do all of that, we're looking at 4 for sure, and probably closer to 5 years. And it seems to me that even if you were to do all of the things that have been suggested, you would still have Ravenwood with far too many students, and Centennial with a population about 200 students under its capacity, maybe 250 in 5 years. The question was raised about Brentwood. Brentwood has right now room for 1,550 students. However, I would remind you that Brentwood is being used as a relief valve for Franklin and Grassland Middle, because we've been allowing open zone students to feed through Brentwood Middle to Brentwood High, and that when you put 3 grades of 25 students per year, then you added 75 students, and 4 grades adds 100 students. So even if we do that until the new middle school is built, Brentwood High School is going to be over its capacity just by the relief valve that we have established on the other side of the county, because we're waiting to build a new middle school. So looking at that, we were, the task was to try to find a solution that would relieve, in the short term, some of that overcrowding